Hey everyone, I'm Andy Anderson, co-owner of AVAIYA University with my partner Ike Allen. Thank you so much for joining us for our Breaking Free from Codependency curriculum. We have another excellent class lined up for you today with Sharon Martin. She's going to be talking with us about how to change codependent thinking that is keeping you stuck. Sharon and I dive into many different things as it relates to this topic of codependency, including what codependent thinking is and where does it originate from. Oftentimes things like this originate from our childhood and how we started programming our minds to think in certain ways based on how we were raised, circumstances of our childhood, our parents, those kinds of things. We also talked about how to begin catching yourself in the moment of these thoughts and begin choosing new thoughts in a really compassionate, loving way towards yourself. And we also dive into a couple of primary fears of codependency, that being not being good enough and a fear of abandonment. Enjoy the class, everybody. Hello, everyone. Welcome to AVAIYA's Breaking Free from Codependency curriculum. I'm Andy Anderson. My partner, Ike Allen, and I are teachers, mentors, and the co-owners of AVAIYA University. AVAIYA is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you so much, as always, for joining us. Our fellow teacher, Sharon Martin, is here to talk with us today about how to change codependent thinking that is keeping you stuck. Sharon is a licensed psychotherapist, mental health writer, and media contributor on emotional health and relationships. Her psychotherapy practice is in San Jose, California, and she specializes in helping people struggling with things like perfectionism, codependency, and people-pleasing. I think I have all three of those. Her own struggle to feel good enough inspired her passion for helping others learn to love and accept themselves. Sharon writes the popular blog called Happily Imperfect for Psych Central. She's also the author of the CBT workbook for perfectionism, speaking of perfectionism. And she's also a featured teacher on AVAIYA's Overcoming Narcissistic Abuse curriculum, as well as Breaking Free from Abandonment and Betrayal. Welcome back, Sharon.
Thank you, Andy. It's great to be here.
Always great to have you. Thanks for doing this with us again and diving into another conversation on this awesome topic of codependency.
Yeah. There's always a lot to say. So it seems like we never run out of different pieces of it to talk about. So hopefully this will be a little bit different for people who have listened to some of the other interviews or some of the other events that you've had.
I think we'll make it different. We'll do it. So let's dive into this topic of codependent thinking. So what exactly do you mean by codependent thinking, and how exactly does this keep people stuck in codependency?
Well, I think, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about our thinking is because, interestingly, I think that we don't actually have a lot of awareness of what we're thinking most of the time. Like, there's just a lot that's running through our heads on either sort of an unconscious level, or just we're busy, we're doing things all the time. And I think we're more aware of the behaviors and less aware of both the thoughts and the feelings that really drive the behaviors. And so if we can sort of back ourselves up and understand how our thoughts contribute to the behaviors that we're trying to stop doing, right? So if we think about our wanting to change our codependent behaviors, certain things that we're doing, relationship patterns, things that are self-sabotaging, not taking good care of ourselves, like those are very, they're concrete things that we can identify and see ourselves doing, if you will. But really, if we want to change that, what we need to do is, like I said, we need to back up and be aware of, okay, well, what is the thought that is leading to that action that I want to stop doing? And this is really true, of any kind of behavioral change that you want to make. It's not, the concept here is not really just about codependency, but since we're talking about codependency, once we sort of, dig into it, people will see that so much of the thinking that they have going on, sort of falls into this idea of codependent thinking, which is what I just consider everything that is sort of an unhealthy belief about yourself or about what it is that you need to do in order to be loved or feel good about yourself or have what you want in life. So a codependent thought could be something that is a reflection of not feeling good about yourself. So it could be something like, I need to take care of everybody else in order for them to love me. or I don't deserve to take a break. That could be a codependent thought. Or it could be something like, it's it's mean if I say no to somebody who asked me for a favor. So there's so many different examples that we could talk about, but I would consider any of those things a codependent thought, because like I said, they will then translate into an action that I take, that is continuing me in this pattern of not taking care of myself, not feeling good about myself, and focusing on other people, taking care of them, worrying about them, trying to figure out what they need, trying to solve their problems, right? And then I'm sort of this externally focused, and then I have neglected what I need and who I am as a person, right? So there isn't even a sense of both what do I need, but what do I want? What's important to me? Who am I? It's always, what is somebody else needing or thinking or feeling or wanting.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Awesome. Thank you. And I appreciate you sharing examples of like types of thoughts that are common that people might have in these scenarios. So let's say someone catches themselves in a thought, like I can't take a break, or I can't go take a nap, or I'm not important enough, those kinds of things. Like what do you do in those moments when you catch yourself thinking that way?
Yeah, so that's a great thing, and that's exactly what we want to do, is just sort of having the awareness of what some of those thoughts sound like for you, because everybody's are a little bit different. But I think often the natural tendency, especially for people who are codependent, is when you realize that you're having this, sort of unhelpful thought, is to then go into this critical place of, oh, I shouldn't be thinking like that. That's a wrong way to think about things. And those are really not helpful thoughts either, right? So we really want to try to stay away from that and try to shift this whole, sort of mentality to a compassionate approach. So if you think about like, okay, I'm having this unhelpful thought, can I approach this with some compassion for myself? Can I have some understanding of why I'm thinking this way, instead of just like scolding myself and telling myself I shouldn't do it? Right. So it might sound something like, okay, so I've realized I've had this unhelpful thought, but and so I realize that, but at the same time, I understand why I'm thinking this way. I can understand, that at one time in my life that this was either a helpful thought, or I often tend to think of it as more of sort of like, it's sort of a survival strategy, if you will, for a lot of people when they're growing up in an unhealthy environment. And we develop both the thoughts and the behaviors as a way of getting through a really difficult experience. And so that's certainly a piece that we can pull out of it and say to ourselves, that was something that was really useful when you were little. You needed to do that to get through that really difficult situation. And so that's that part where like I said, where I can have that compassion for myself. And then I can sort of move into now this isn't really working so well for me anymore. I don't really need to keep thinking like that. That's really not getting me where I want to be in life, or in my relationships, or in my relationship with myself. So now I'm going to try to think about it in a different way, in a way that's really going to support my self-esteem, or my healthier relationships, or my well-being, my health, whatever that is for you. So that's how I would start with it, is really trying to come at it from a place of understanding for yourself and just kindness. Even if you don't think so much in terms of the roots of where it came from for you, you can certainly on a basic level just be compassionate with yourself. And again, this can be really for anything that you notice that you're doing or thinking that's really not in line with what you want, the goal that you have for yourself now. Is to just extend, that same kindness to yourself that you would to somebody else. And that's what I always tell everybody is I know, this is, one of the things that's probably universally true about codependents is they're great at taking care of people. I mean, they absolutely, every single person who's listening to this, I know, has a lot of compassion for other people. We just, and it's exactly the same thing. We just need to turn it, around. And I think sometimes we almost get stuck on the, I'm not sure if I deserve the compassion. And I would suggest to people that why not just give it a try? Even if you're not 100% convinced that that's what you should be doing. Sometimes it's almost as if you think like, well, I know what I have been doing hasn't been working. So, why don't you try this other approach and see if it's any better? It's unlikely that it's going to be worse. I can't guarantee it's going to be better, but I'm pretty sure, that being kind to yourself is not going to make you feel worse.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, I love that. That was good. I really enjoyed that you took us through the start of a thought and then kind of this positive self-talk, kind of compassionate dialogue that we can have with ourselves and also, yeah, the understanding of potentially where it came from. That's really helpful for me. I definitely notice it's like, oh, well, yeah, got it. You're thinking this because this is a coping mechanism from when your parents got divorced. Then it starts to make perfect sense to really, get in touch with that part that has been, suffering. So that's great.
Yeah. And I think we tend to forget that because we think the same things over and over and over again. So, the other piece of it is that, when we have a thought is we assume that it is a truth, like that this is a fact, right? That it is, we'll just continue to use that, really simple example of, I shouldn't take a break. I should just keep on working, right? So if I take that thought as a truth, right, then of course I feel compelled, to behave accordingly, right? But this is the other piece of sort of looking at that thought and really trying to investigate, like, is it really true? Mm-hmm. Right? Because again, that's the part that like we just go about our life thinking things. It's a very ingrained belief system that we all have because, we think something and then because we act on that and we feel certain ways because of that thought, it self-reinforces it. So we think it over and over and over again. And I would say, the other piece, for codependency is that we're often in relationships with people who will reinforce those thoughts and those beliefs as well, right? They will tell us things again. So, right, it's not, a lot of it is stuff that we bring with us from childhood, but then, if we're sort of recreating, similar relationship patterns with people who are once again saying, you need to do that, that's your job, or, you're lazy for taking a break, right? That's going to, again, reinforce that thought that, I better not take a break. That's a terrible thing for me to do. I don't deserve a break, right? I'm not, only, people who've, done everything perfectly or, worked really hard get breaks, but not me. Yeah. Right. And so, right, that becomes, like I said, it feels like it's a truth, right? And it's only if, it definitely takes work, right? I'm not trying to, say that this is an easy task at all. But what we need to do is really, consider the possibility again that, well, maybe this isn't 100% true. Yeah. How could I figure that out? And I think even just having the idea that it's, possibly not true is at least opening the door a little bit there, to consider that, maybe there's another way to look at this, or maybe there are some other things that are true about me, that I could consider. Yeah. Or again, it's almost like, instead of just thinking of it as all or nothing, right? Maybe there's some middle ground here too. Maybe sometimes it's okay for me to take a break, and other times I really should keep working, right?
Yeah, all or nothing thinking. I'm glad you mentioned that because I was going to ask you about that. That is an experience that I definitely frequently have as far as being rather codependent in many ways, and the type of thinking that sometimes gets me stuck. And I know so many other people have that kind of all or nothing, black or white kinds of kind of thinking. So yeah, I'm glad you touched on that. And yeah, just the simplicity of, is it true? I love that. That's actually like my partner Ike's favorite question for everybody is it true? It's so simple.
But it's surprisingly hard to answer sometimes. The other question that I have found helpful is to ask yourself, is this a fact or is this an opinion? right? And that's an interesting question, to consider, because I think a lot of times we're going through life thinking something's a fact, but maybe this is actually, it's my opinion or it's your opinion about, about me or what I should be doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, and again, if it's an opinion, then it opens up that possibility that, okay, well, we could possibly have differing opinions about things. Um, as well. And there's, an opinion is not inherently right or wrong, right? It's simply one person's belief about something. And again, I think as we sort of talk about, recovering from codependency, one of the things that we want to do is to develop our own opinions and feel like they're valid, just as valid as anybody else's opinion. And certainly our opinions about ourselves are very important. And that's something that we get to choose. We get to choose what we think about ourselves. We don't have to accept what people have been telling us.
Right. Yeah. So one question around that would be, I guess, when someone is in the mindset or in the opinion of I'm not good enough, and I know this is a big core foundation of what you do in your work, how would you walk someone through having that thought a lot in their life and that affecting their behavior and their relationships?
Well, I think, that is such a big, it feels like a very broad belief or thought to have. I'm not good enough, right? That covers so, so many aspects of who we are, that I would really be interested in finding out, what does that specifically mean for you? In what way do you think that you're not good enough? Right? Is that in, everything? I think that's our tendency, is to say,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not good at everything, right? Well, I'd really have a hard time believing that you're not, good enough at anything in your life. And again, I think part of the questions that we want to ask is, well, who's deciding that you're not good enough? Right. And it's not that other people's opinions don't have any bearing. I mean, they certainly do, especially if it's a person who you're very close to. But I think what has happened is that the other person's, or other people's opinions have basically just like blotted out, your own opinion. And what I want to do is at least, start for you to think about what your own opinion might be, or what your own belief might be of your worthiness. So that we can at least, get it on the table,
Yeah.
right? And give it, its due place, I think. And like I said, part of it is I think, if you can think about this idea of choice, it can maybe feel a little bit scary, but I think it can also be very empowering to realize that you do have a choice in how you feel and what you do and what you think. Um, they're all interconnected, of course, but this gives you this huge amount of power to, to determine how you feel about yourself, and then how you behave in the world as well. Um, but I
Yeah.
think even just like looking at that part of it can be an interesting thing. Think about, well, how do I want to feel about myself? What are the thoughts that I want to be having?
Yeah. Right. It's
Can I,
interesting.
right? And
Yeah.
can
It's
I
like you,
sort of intentionally try to think those thoughts?
uh-huh. Yeah. Even just like the thing that you said about like, right, you have a choice about what you think about yourself. Wow. That's probably like big epiphany for, I think, so many people, because I think so many people are living in, well, no, I'm not good enough. That's the truth, and that's fact. But no, yeah, you can actually, you have a choice in the matter, in the mix of is that true or not? That's powerful.
Right. And that's true of so many things. Is that, again, I mean, there's such, so much of this is going on the unconscious level that we're not even aware, almost, that, the thought is yours, but the thought is yours because somebody has told you that about you at some point. Again, whether you're aware of it, or whether they, said it in those exact words, or whether their behavior, sort of brought you to that conclusion. um, but if you think about, little children don't inherently just think that they're unworthy, right?
Right.
I mean, that has to come that idea has come from somebody else who has told them that, or behaved in a way towards them that caused them to have that idea about themselves.
Yeah.
Right, so that's not our natural state of, feeling or thinking about ourselves. I mean, I think, little kids generally feel pretty good about themselves,
Right.
right? Until somebody has said to them, there's something wrong with you.
Mhm. Yeah, and that also, like, that black or white thinking comes into that whole conversation again, because I loved how you answered that as far as the I'm not good enough, because it is such a broad question. Oh, so you're saying you're not good enough at anything, like everything that you do, or all the behaviors, all your traits are not good enough? Well, oh, wait, actually I'm really good at cooking, or I'm really good at whatever, that's just, yeah, that's a good way to
Yeah,
put it.
that's part of it. I mean, the idea of worth is, it's complicated because and I do this too. I mean, our natural tendency is to think of our worth has to be based on some kind of like objective measure, like
Mhm.
it's an achievement based belief system, or it's a comparative system where, your worth is in comparison to somebody else's. Um, like that is definitely the way, that I think most of us in the United States have grown up with, that kind of mindset. Like that's what worth means, and it's really hard to get out of that and come to an idea of just like that people have worth no matter what their ability is. um, Right. I mean, obviously, we know that we all have different strengths and different talents, right? Different people are, good at different things. But if we even try to like sort of get away from trying to say, my worth is based on, whatever, right? I'm a good therapist or a good mother, or, right? Instead of just saying like, everybody has worth, and it's as simple and as complicated as that,
Mhm.
right? That it just is.
Mhm.
Not because of anything, not because
Right.
you've done anything or not done anything.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because it is true. Like, even my mind, just when I asked you that, it generally goes to something related to productivity. Oh, I or someone else does this thing really well, or paints really well, or does whatever it is. And yeah, it's right, being whole and complete, period. Being
Right.
worth it,
Because, yeah.
period.
Right. Because the problem with that is that as soon as you can no longer, do, the cooking or the writing or the whatever it is that you were basing your worth on, or if it's, as a mother or a father or a spouse, right, and you no longer have those roles, then you no longer have worth, right? And, obviously that's very problematic because, life is not stagnant like that, right? um, and our worth as a person doesn't change, if we become sick or disabled or we get a divorce, right? Those shouldn't be the basis of our worth, right? We want our worth to feel like it is a constant. It's always there, and these other things are sort of going to come and go in our life, but we want to feel essentially like reasonably good about ourselves, no matter what we're achieving, or whatever, how productive we are, or how
Yeah.
much money we have, or any of those kinds of things that we might
Mhm.
tend to want to base worth on.
Yeah, I love that we're diving deep into self-worth, because it's a very important concept. To me, it's so the foundation of so many codependent behaviors and tendencies. And and yeah, it's just coming at it in a totally different way than I think the human mind often comes at it. What about abandonment? I'd love to touch on that briefly, because that seems to be another one of those big cores that drives a lot of codependency. Any thoughts on overcoming that kind of thinking when the abandonment
Sure.
kinds of fears come up?
I think when we think about abandonment, our natural, tendency is to say, okay, well, that's a fear-based thought that I'm having. Again, I may or may not even be aware of it, but I think that thought then leads us to a lot of our behaviors, such as, the people pleasing and caretaking and rescuing behaviors, because underneath that is our sort of frantic, almost, trying to hold on to somebody, trying to hold on to a relationship because we don't want them to leave. And again, I think if we go right back to where we were talking about the self-worth piece, you can see how that self-worth, the feeling like you're not enough, you're not good enough, there's something defective about you, then will bring you really quickly to that fear of abandonment, right? If I don't feel like I'm a good enough, whatever, just a good enough person, I think people aren't going to want to stick around, right? And again, this can be because literally people have abandoned you, either physically or emotionally, or it's just something that comes from that feeling of not being good enough. So then we start acting in ways to try to hold on to people, hold on to relationships, sometimes that really aren't even the healthiest, people or relationships for us to have. But it feels worse to have somebody leave, right? That ends up feeling like, well, that's confirmation that I'm not good enough, right? There's something wrong with me, because if I was, then that other person would want to be with me. Right. And you can, I know you, Andy, can see where the thinking has really gotten off there. Right. And that's what I hope that everybody listening can start to hear. Like, there's something not quite right about the way that I'm thinking about that situation. Right. Because there's a lot of other reasons that people might choose to leave, not necessarily because there's something wrong with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And again, I think if we can just start to, let some of those other possibilities be considered, then we can start to shift our thinking, rather than just the automatic thought going to it's about me, and it's about me in a really bad way.
Yeah.
Right. It's not about me in a positive situation, right? It's about, what have I done wrong? How have I failed? How am I not good enough? Rather than, obviously in relationships, there's two people at least, right? So it can't be all about me. I'm not going to say there can't be a piece that's about me. But your first thought should not be, I've done something wrong, or I'm not good enough.
Yeah. And often is in so many ways. So yeah, it's like that knee-jerk reaction. But yes, and I love that you could explore other possibilities as to what's happening in your life. Oh, could it be because this person is struggling with something that I'm unaware of, or something coming up from their childhood that's getting, intertwined with our relationship, or, those kinds of things. So yeah, that's a important piece in, restructuring our thinking there. I love it.
Yeah.
What about feeling? I'd love to touch on that real quick before we start wrapping up. It seems to be that a lot of codependents have a hard time feeling, or they've stuffed their feelings for a long time based on, childhood or what have you. Any suggestions there on being able to, I guess, get in touch with our feelings again?
Sure. I'm struggling because I have a lot to say about it, and I probably can't fit it all in here. Because you're right. We've been talking mostly about our thoughts, but our thoughts also create our feelings, which was probably a whole nother conversation, really. But
it'll be a good excuse to have you back again.
Okay. So anyway, so part of it is, with both our thoughts and our feelings, some of this is really sort of things that have become essentially kind of bad habits for us, right? Is that we have gotten used to not wanting to feel our feelings, trying to numb out, trying to push them away. And so we just keep doing them. And again, this is something that you can think about as having been useful at one point in your life, right? When you're a little kid and you're overwhelmed with feelings, and you don't have a person who's willing to listen, or you don't have the ability to regulate your feelings or even know what to do with them. And you're often getting the messages from the adults in your life that you shouldn't have any feelings, right? You shouldn't be angry. You shouldn't be sad about things. You learn to push them down, and that serves a purpose for you. The problem, of course, is, that those feelings stick around. The other problem is that we tend to then start numbing and pushing away all of our feelings, even the more positive, enjoyable feelings. But again, I mean, that's sort of, another piece of it. But I say that in part to say, what we want to be able to invite all of those feelings in. And when we talk about feeling our feelings, I don't want people to just think that, oh, now you're going to need to feel all the really difficult feelings, all the unpleasant ones, because that's not, a task that anybody wants to sign up for. But what I want people to remember is it also means you're going to be able to more fully feel the positive feelings, the enjoyable things, the pleasurable things in your life. And that's part of the upside here. The other upside is that you will eventually sort of get to, process through, the backlog of the negative feelings and sort of be able to eventually clear those out. So anyway, part of this is to say that you do have a choice also in the way that you feel about things. And here's where I'm just going to backlog a little bit. I'll try to keep it short. Is that, again, so when you think about that, you have a choice in what you think. You also are choosing the feeling that is associated with that. And I'll just try to give you a really quick example here. So let's just say that you are walking around your neighborhood, and you see a neighbor that walking on the other side of the street, and you're waving and saying, oh, hi, and your neighbor just walks on by and ignores you, right? You could choose how you think about that situation. You could choose to think, oh, my neighbor must be mad at me, she totally ignored me, blew me off there, right? Or you could choose to think, oh, she must have been distracted and thinking about something else that was on her mind, and she probably just didn't even hear me. Right? You could think other things too, but we'll just stick with those two, right? And now you can see that depending on which of those thoughts that you chose to have, you might feel very differently about your neighbor, right? And about that interaction, right? So if you chose the first one, you might go home and be really angry at your neighbor. The other one, you might actually, be concerned, or you might, feel some compassion for her, or be curious about what's going on, right? So you now see that the feeling isn't just happening to you, but you actually have a more active role in having the feelings that you want to have. Right. I mean, these are perceptions, right? We have no idea at this point why your neighbor didn't say hello to you, right? So when you don't know, you don't have to choose, the worst scenario again that is now confirming, oh, she must not like you, Andy, right? That's not the assumption that the thought that you need to choose, right? I mean, that again just keeps you stuck in that pattern of feeling bad about yourself.
That is such a good example. And I'm sure so many people can relate to things like that happening in life. And that, again, that knee-jerk reaction of, oh, it must be about me, as opposed to, you have no idea what's going on with her life today. Maybe who knows, right? Something's going on in her life. She's, stressed out about something. Maybe she didn't see you. Maybe she's on a phone call and you can't see her earbud. I mean, who knows, right? It's many, many different things, but that's powerful. So that is, right, confirmation of our power to choose our thinking as well as our feeling from that perspective. So that was awesome. I love it. Thank you.
Okay.
Let's
not sure it was exactly the answer to the question, but hopefully it was useful.
Yeah, no, I thought that was great. That was really good. So let's talk about a gift you have for everybody, as well as an offer. And everyone watching right now, there's a couple buttons below this video, so you can click on those to go over to Sharon's site. So what do you have for everybody?
Okay, so I have a freebie for everybody that is a set of worksheets that I have created that are exactly about the topic that we're talking about here. So they are helping you to think about your thinking, identify what are your particular codependent thoughts that are getting you stuck, and take you through some of the steps and some exercises. So you can sign up and then download those and work through the exercises on there to help you on your thinking. And then there is a special offer that is called the ABCs of Codependency, which is, it's an ebook on setting boundaries and a couple of other great little extras on there. There's meditation and some journal prompts and some affirmations. So hopefully all together that gives you a good starting place on making some positive changes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And there's a code below for that offer, everybody. So you'll just need to copy and paste that into the checkout to get that. And thank you, Sharon. This has been awesome as always.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Absolutely. Any last insights? Anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
I think we're in a good place. I don't want to take us down another rabbit hole, but yes, I mean, I hope that everybody got a few little takeaways there, and just to really sort of consider that you have more choices in the thoughts that you're having. And it like I was saying, I mean, it does really take a lot of intentional work to pay attention to the thought and then to change it. So I will just say, like, it is clunky at the beginning when you start doing it. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to do it in the moment of, like having a conversation. Oftentimes in the beginning, it's like you're almost going to find that you're, excuse me, sort of doing it after the fact, saying, oh, I recognize I had the thought, right? And eventually you get to the point where the new thought becomes automatic. But at the beginning, it's most likely going to be, oh, I noticed that I did it, so let me see how I could sort of correct it now.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's helpful for everyone starting the journey and what to expect. So thank you so much for doing this. And as always, for sharing about these topics with me. I really appreciate you.
Thanks so much, Andy.
And thank you everyone for showing up for yourself, for being here with us on this journey. And we'll see you again real soon. Take care. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this latest class with Sharon Martin, How to Change Codependent Thinking That Keeps You Stuck. Really love this conversation. I really love that Sharon dove into specifically how our thoughts create the different behaviors that we might have that we would deem as codependent, things like people pleasing, controlling behavior, fears of abandonment, those kinds of things. So she talked a lot about catching yourself in the act and how to really train yourself to recognize when you're having certain thoughts that don't serve you, that aren't empowering you, and ask yourself, is it true? I love that. She also talked about, is it fact or is it not fact? Those kinds of things. And I love the is it true question, because this is a question that my partner Ike is very well known for asking myself and others and all the people and clients that he works with. Is it true? Is your thinking in this moment true? Do you know that what you're thinking right now is true? You might be thinking something like, I'm not good enough. Well, how exactly do you know that that's true? And what do you mean by that? And I'll dive into a little bit more about self-worth in a minute, but be compassionate about where these thoughts are coming from, like Sharon said, because so many of us grew up in environments and in households that we may have really struggled with getting our needs met or feeling loved or being taken care of and all of that kind of stuff. You could have grown up in addiction, similar to myself. You could have grown up in with a narcissistic parent, those kinds of things that has led you to creating these different thought patterns and creating these different behavior patterns that lead you to this codependency and why you're here. So be compassionate. These things were developed, these ways of thinking, these ways of behaving were developed as a way to help you survive, as a way to help keep you safe. So give yourself a break and be responsible for your thinking, become aware of your thinking, and be responsible for changing it. But don't beat yourself up, because that's not gonna get you anywhere. So a couple of things I also wanted to mention are these two primary fears of codependency that Sharon and I talked about. So I consider there are two primary fears of codependency, that fear of not being good enough and that fear of abandonment. These two things, in my experience of codependency, just kind of fall in and out of each other. They're like in this infinity loop of fear of not being good enough, fear of being abandoned, and they just go back and forth and ping pong back and forth in so many of our lives. So let's touch a little bit on this fear of not being good enough. Like we mentioned, this is a very all or nothing kind of thinking. So what exactly do you mean when you think you are not good enough? And also, you might start listing things. Okay, well, wait a second. Maybe actually I'm really good at doing this. I'm really good at riding a bike. I'm really good at putting on AVAIYA events. I'm really good at talking to people, those kinds of things. So I guess I'm not good enough. But also keep in mind to not just value yourself for what you do or what you produce in life or different performance-based behaviors, those kinds of things, your accomplishments, your success. as opposed to, always valuing yourself for all of the things that you do and maybe you can see results for in the world. Value you for who you are. And that might take some exploring to figure that out and to really get in touch with who you are as a human being, not just a human doing. And the other one I wanted to touch on, these major core fears of codependency, is the fear of abandonment. And is this something that you tend to have a knee-jerk reaction if someone leaves and goes to the grocery store? Maybe it's your partner, maybe it's who knows. Is your knee-jerk reaction that maybe, oh my God, they're mad at me? Oh my God, what if I've done something wrong? Oh my gosh, people are going to leave me. Just recognizing once again that you need to start taking a look at your thinking and asking yourself, is this true? Is what I'm saying true right now? And oftentimes, and Sharon and I talked about this, we tend to think in ways that it has to be all about us. Oh my gosh, this person who walked down the road, this neighbor that I always talk to, all of a sudden isn't saying hi to me. Oh my gosh, it must be about me. It must be something I've done. Maybe did I forget to text her last week? What happened? Why is she mad at me? Those kinds of things. So just keeping in mind that, right, we have all these other people in our life, that it's not always just about us. There are things going on in other people's lives that affect how they behave towards us, but it doesn't have to be about us. So just keeping that in mind in the world of black and white thinking, and really feeding into that abandonment fear of you've done something wrong and people are going to leave you. So recognize those moments when you get caught up in that. So I wanted to make one last mention. Sharon she's been on many events here at AVAIYA, and I've always loved her down-to-earth style and loving approach to helping people. And if you have not checked out her other classes in our Breaking Free from Abandonment and Betrayal curriculum, as well as our Overcoming Narcissistic Abuse curriculum, I highly recommend it. So thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you again real soon.